He rejected me, and his alpha brother claimed me. They dragged her through the courtyard like she didn't have a heartbeat. Seren Vale's boots scraped the stone path, toes catching on frozen mud and half-melted snow, but no one stopped to help her find her footing. Two enforcers held her arms so tight her shoulders ached, but she didn't make a sound. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Not when she was shaking from the inside out. Not when her heart already knew what her mind hadn't dared admit yet. The ceremony was supposed to be sacred. Quiet. Private. But this was a spectacle. The courtyard was packed. Elders in their silver robes watched from the high steps, unmoving, eyes like frost. Warriors lined the edges, armor glinting in the cold moonlight. Younger wolves whispered from behind their hands. And standing at the center, hands clasped behind his back like he wasn't about to rip her soul in half, was Beta Lucien. Her mate. Her destined. Her supposed forever. The one fate had carved into her skin with a burning mark just weeks ago. Lucien didn't look at her when she stumbled to a stop in front of him. He kept his chin high, shoulders squared, like this wasn't a bond blessing, but an execution. And maybe it was. Maybe that was the whole point. The wind shifted, bitter and sharp. And there it was again, his scent. The one her wolf had clawed toward from the moment she'd caught it. Warm cedar and wildfire. The kind of smell that wrapped around your ribs and said mine before your brain could even catch up. But not anymore. Something inside her twisted hard. Her mark, curved, golden, alive, burned against the inside of her wrist, as if it already knew what was coming. As if it wanted to scream before she could. She raised her eyes, met his for the first time since the night her mark appeared. And he looked bored. Lucien didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Just stared at her like she was a problem to be solved, not the girl whose fate was tied to his soul. Then he spoke. Loud. Cold. Measured. This is the one fate chose for me. Not a question. A statement. Dismissive. Like it was a joke. A few of the elders shifted. One coughed. Seren's chest tightened. Lucien stepped closer. His boots didn't crunch in the snow. He moved like a predator pretending to be a man. I reject the bond. Just like that. No hesitation. No explanation. No apology. The air left her lungs like she'd been punched. A ringing started in her ears, sharp and hollow, and her knees wobbled before she caught herself. But her legs were shaking now. Her whole body buzzing like it had lost its center. He didn't stop. I reject the bond, he said again, louder this time, for the whole damn pack to hear. I refuse the mate fate offered me. Let it be known. Seren stared at him. He looked straight past her. The mark on her wrist lit up, bright as fire, and then it didn't fade. It burned harder. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Quiet, stunned. Because that wasn't how rejection worked. When a bond was severed, the mark faded. That was the law of the moon. The way of the wolves. But hers was glowing brighter than ever. Lucien frowned for the first time. Just slightly. A tick of his jaw. One of the elders stood. The girl is still marked. Fate does not release her. Seren's voice rose, cracked, desperate. Why? The elder shook his head. Something is incomplete. Lucien snapped. She's just a broken omega. Fate made a mistake. And that was it. No explanation. No trial. No grace. Lucien turned on his heel, cloak snapping behind him, and walked away. And no one stopped him. Seren dropped. Her knees hit the snow first, then her hands, bare and shaking. The world tilted. The cold rushed into her bones like ice water. And still, her mark pulsed gold beneath her skin. They left her there. Just left her. One by one, the wolves turned and filed out of the courtyard like it was over. Like she hadn't just been shattered in front of all of them. Like she was already forgotten. She didn't cry. She couldn't. It was beyond crying now. The snow soaked through her skirt. Her fingers curled into fists, clutching at the earth like it could anchor her. But everything kept spinning. Kept breaking. Kept burning. She tried to stand, and her legs betrayed her. Her vision swam. The last thing she saw before the darkness pulled her under was a pair of glowing eyes watching her from the forest edge. Not Lucien's. These were darker, wilder, hungrier. And they didn't blink. Cold bit into her skin, deeper than before. She opened her eyes slowly. Snowflakes were falling now, thick and heavy, but the moon still glared down through broken clouds like it was watching her, judging her. She wasn't alone. Something moved just beyond the treeline. Slow, purposeful. A shape too large to be human, too silent to be anything ordinary. A wolf. Not from her pack. Bigger, black as night, watching her. She should have been afraid. Her wolf, buried deep inside her chest, should have flinched, should have pulled back. But it didn't. The bond she was supposed to feel with Lucien, that invisible thread that should have snapped when he rejected her, it tugged. Not toward him. Toward the shadow in the trees. The wolf didn't growl. Didn't bare its teeth. Just stood there, unmoving, eyes locked on hers like it saw something she didn't yet know about herself. And the strangest part? The pain stopped. The mark on her wrist still burned, but now it throbbed in rhythm with something else. Something distant and dark and ancient. Like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. Like a calling. She sat up slowly, spine stiff, head pounding. The courtyard was empty now. Silent, save for the snow and the breath catching in her throat. And still the wolf didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't leave. He just watched her. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Because somehow she already knew. That wasn't just a wolf. That was another alpha. And he had no business being here. The last of the fire in her blood flared against her skin, then settled into a slow, heavy pulse. Her bones ached. Her lungs still hadn't caught up. But her eyes never left his. The black wolf stepped forward. One paw, then another, then another. Snow didn't crunch beneath him. He moved like smoke and sin. And when he reached the edge of the stone courtyard, just 10 feet from her broken body on the ground, he stopped, his head tilted, and her mark flared so hard it seared gold straight through the fabric on her wrist. She gasped. Because whatever Lucien had broken, this creature, this stranger, was waking back up inside her. The pain, the fury, the bond. But it wasn't the one fate gave her. It was the one fate had no control over. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her wrist. The glow pulsed harder. The wolf turned away, just as silently as he came. Gone. Back into the woods. Like a warning. Like a promise. And she was left alone again. But not the same. Not anymore. Because whatever had just passed between them wasn't over. Not even close. But the glow on her skin pulsed harder, just as another set of eyes appeared from the dark. Do you think fate ever gets it wrong? If this moment gripped you, follow Sophia's Werewolf Chronicles. Seren's story is just beginning. The snow never stopped. Not even after the courtyard emptied, not even after the wolf disappeared. It kept falling slow, silent, like the world had decided to cover everything up before she could make sense of what had just happened. Seren didn't know how long she sat there. Her bones had gone numb. Her skin stung where her mark kept glowing, then fading, then glowing again like a pulse that didn't know how to die. But she couldn't move. Not yet. Her body was still caught in the space between pain and something else. The rejection hadn't faded. That ache still clawed beneath her ribs. Still lived behind her eyes, waiting to split her open if she dared to speak. But the moment the black wolf had locked eyes with her, something strange had slipped into that emptiness. Something just as dangerous. And it hadn't left. She knew she should go. Crawl if she had to. Get out of the open before someone came back to finish what Lucien started. But her muscles wouldn't cooperate. Her breath fogged in the air, shallow and tight. The tips of her fingers were stiff, clumsy. Her wolf was quiet now, buried deep, but not gone. Just waiting. And then she heard it. Crunch. 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 Footsteps. Not many. Just one pair. Slow. Measured. Heavy enough to suggest control. Light enough to suggest power. Not a patrol. Not an elder. Not Lucien. Something colder wrapped around her spine. The footsteps stopped behind her. She didn't turn. She couldn't. But she felt it, heat. Real heat. Not from the snow, not from a fire. From a body. A presence. A warmth that didn't match the frozen night around her. Then a voice. Deep. Low. Quiet, but not soft. You're freezing. It wasn't a question. Her breath caught. And still, she couldn't look up. The figure moved closer, just enough for the scent to hit her. Not cedar. Not smoke. Something darker. Clean earth, lightning, rain before it hits the ground. Wild and deep and not from here. It made her stomach twist. Not from fear. From recognition. Her wolf woke. Just like that. One flicker of that scent, and something inside her flared up like dry leaves catching flame. Her heart beat too hard. Her mark burned so fast it made her vision blur. She pressed her wrist to her chest like she could smother it, hide it. He noticed. You're marked, he said. Not surprised. Just observant. Still, she didn't speak. Then, suddenly, gently, he crouched in front of her. She could feel the shift in the air, the way it moved around him like it obeyed his shape. Not beta energy. Not even close. He was alpha. She knew it without needing proof. It rolled off him in waves, pressure, stillness, command. And then she looked up. And there he was. Eyes like deep pine. A scar down one cheek that didn't take away from the beauty of him, it added to it. Gave his face history. Battle. A life lived beyond the rules of the pack. His gaze didn't drop to her body. He didn't leer. He didn't flinch at the ruin she must have looked like. He just saw her. And she hated that it made something in her chest crack wide open. He shrugged off his coat and held it out. She hesitated. You're shivering, he said, quieter now. Take it. Her fingers didn't want to work, but somehow she reached. The fabric was warm. Heavy. It smelled like him. Her mark pulsed once, like it agreed with her decision. She wrapped the coat around herself, but it was his closeness that kept her warm. He didn't ask her name. Didn't ask what happened. He already knew. He stood again and looked toward the woods. They won't come back tonight. She finally found her voice. Dry. Hollow. Who are you? His gaze returned to her. Kael. And her heart dropped straight into her stomach. Because she knew that name. Kael. Lucien's brother. The one who vanished after the inheritance ceremony. The one they said wasn't fit to lead. The one with no pack, no loyalty, no place. The one they warned girls like her to stay far away from. She stared at him. He waited. No explanation. No defense. And somehow that made it worse. What do you want? She whispered. His brow furrowed slightly, like the question offended him. To stop you from dying in the snow. Her throat tightened. Why? That made him pause. Really pause. Then, finally, because I felt it too. The words hung there, frozen in the air between them. Because I felt it too. Her mouth opened. Closed. No sound came out. She didn't understand it. Couldn't. He wasn't her mate. Her bond belonged to Lucien. That was the whole tragedy. That was the cruelty. That was the punishment. But when Kael looked at her, it didn't feel wrong. It felt like home. Even her wolf leaned forward inside her chest, pressing against her ribs like she knew something Seren didn't. And Kael. Kael wasn't looking at her wrist. He wasn't fixated on the mark like everyone else. He was watching her face. Like he was waiting for something. Like he already knew what came next. I can walk, she said quietly. You can't, he replied, just as quiet. And he was right. Because the second she tried to stand, her legs collapsed under her. And without hesitation, he caught her. His arms wrapped around her body like he'd been built to do it. Not gentle. Not rough. Just right. The moment her skin touched his, the mark on her wrist blazed hot again. She gasped. His arms tensed. But he didn't let go. Didn't move. Didn't breathe for a moment. Then, carefully, he shifted her weight and lifted her into his arms. Her cheek pressed against his shoulder, and her wolf whimpered. Not from fear. From recognition. It didn't make sense. She knew that. It shouldn't make sense. But it did. He didn't speak again. Just walked. Smooth and sure, like she weighed nothing. Like this wasn't strange. Like this wasn't forbidden. The forest swallowed them. And the moon watched. She didn't remember falling asleep. All she knew was warmth. The deep kind. Firelight. Thick blankets. The smell of herbs and pine. The soft creak of wood and stone walls breathing against wind. And the scent. His scent. Still wrapped around her like a second skin. She blinked. Slowly. Groggily. The room came into view. Not a den. Not a pack house. Something older. Wilder. Built from hand-cut logs and stone, with pelts hanging on the walls and iron tools resting by the fire. She shifted. And her body ached. But her soul felt something else entirely. Then she heard it. Not a sound. A feeling. Someone watching. She turned her head. And there he was. Kael. Leaning against the far wall. Arms crossed. Eyes dark, unreadable. He hadn't changed clothes. Hadn't moved much. Just waited. You slept for a while, he said. She tried to sit up. He didn't stop her. How long? A day. Her eyes widened. You needed it, he added. She studied him. He didn't explain who he was. What he was doing here. Why he saved her. Why his scent made her body respond like it belonged to him. And when her eyes dropped to her wrist, it was still glowing. Soft now. Not angry. Not burning. But undeniably alive. And every time he moved, it pulsed. She looked up at him, heart stammering. What are you? She whispered. He tilted his head slightly. Not your mate. It was the truth. And it wasn't the whole truth. Her voice trembled. But you're Wolf, it looked at me like. Mine knows you. Simple. Blunt. Honest. Her chest tightened. And for the first time in her life, the pain of being rejected wasn't louder than the silence between her and someone else. Kael stepped closer. Her mark flared again. It shouldn't have. But it did. And Kael just watched. Unmoving. Unapologetic. As if some part of him had been waiting for her longer than he could explain. As if his wolf had already made the choice. Before either of them had the chance to stop it. The mark on her wrist wasn't his. But his wolf didn't seem to care. If this moment left you breathless, you're not alone. Don't miss what's coming next on Sophia's Werewolf Chronicles. The bond only just began to burn. The silence after truth is never kind. Seren sat across from him, the fire casting flickers of gold along the side of Kael's face. He hadn't moved since she woke. And she hadn't dared ask why her mark still pulsed when he was near. They both felt it. But neither of them named it. Because fate had already spoken, hadn't it? Her mate had stood beneath the moon and shattered her in front of the whole pack. That should have been the end of her story. But Kael's wolf didn't care about rules. And her heart didn't know what to do with the quiet ache in her chest when he looked at her like that. Like she was more than what she'd been told she was. She left at dawn. Not because she wanted to, but because there were still pieces of her life tangled back in the place that spat her out. The Crescent Pack had raised her, fed her, watched her grow from a girl into a shadow. And now, she needed to see if they had ever truly seen her at all. Kael didn't argue when she told him. He didn't offer help either. Just met her eyes with that same unreadable look and handed her a dark cloak. You'll freeze without it, he said. His fingers brushed hers when she took it. And her mark flared. Soft. Warm. Almost shy. She didn't speak. Just nodded, pulled the hood up, and stepped out into the frostbitten morning. The walk home felt like someone else's memory. Everything looked smaller now. The trees less imposing. The guard towers less threatening. The same wolves who once nodded politely when she passed now looked through her like fog. A stranger. She stepped through the front gate, and it was like the whole world stilled for half a heartbeat. Whispers rose. She didn't bother hiding her wrist. The golden glow had dulled to a low ember, but it was still there. Alive. And that alone was enough to make the first elder step forward, eyes narrow with disbelief. You shouldn't be here, the woman said. Seren held her ground. I came for answers. The elder's mouth tightened. Lucien rejected you. The bond is void. Then why is my mark still burning? Silence. The elder's gaze flicked to her wrist, then quickly away. Another stepped forward. Male. Tall. Weathered. You carry dangerous energy. It could infect the others. Infect, she echoed, stunned. You should have faded, girl. The moon chose him, he refused, and that should have been the end. But it's not, Seren whispered. You see that? Which makes you a threat. And, just like that, the words were a sentence. She wasn't there to be understood. She was there to be removed. She didn't flinch when they called the guards. Didn't beg. Didn't run. She simply stepped back, cloak still heavy around her shoulders, and let them see what they had created. A girl who was no longer theirs. A mate who'd been denied, but not destroyed. The forest welcomed her like it had been waiting. Branches swayed in slow rhythm above her head, and her feet found their way back to Kael's territory without a second thought. The rogue lands didn't look like crescents. There were no stone towers, no border sentries. Just tall trees, the howl of wolves deep in the wild, and something that felt far more ancient than law. She didn't announce herself. He already knew she was coming. The cabin door opened before she reached it. He stood there, silhouetted in the frame, firelight behind him, no expression on his face. They banished you, he said. They didn't have to say the words. She stepped inside. It was sometime past nightfall when the memories began. Sleep never came easy anymore. Her body was tired, but her mind played old scenes in new ways. She curled beneath the fur blanket, breath shallow, the mark on her wrist cool now, but still present, still whispering. And then, it started. Not in her head. In her skin. A pressure. A flicker. A memory burned into muscle. She saw herself younger, 7? Maybe 8, running through the trees near the training fields. She'd snuck away after a patrol passed. No one noticed Omegas. Until she saw him. The boy was older. Taller. He wore the colors of the Beta house. His eyes too dark. His smile too wide. She didn't remember why he'd grabbed her. Or what she'd said to provoke it. But she remembered the pain. The shove. The growl that wasn't play. She remembered the claw. It raked across her side, hot, fast, final. And then, black. She shot up in bed, drenched in sweat. Kael was already at her side. You were thrashing, he said, steady. You shifted in your sleep. Her hand went to her ribs instinctively. He noticed. You're bleeding. She looked down. The scar was back. Old. Crooked. Almost invisible in daylight. But now it pulsed like the mark on her wrist. And it bled. Kael's jaw tightened. You didn't fall, he said. Someone attacked you. She met his eyes, throat dry. How do you know? I know a beta's claw when I smell it. And then his gaze darkened. Because he'd caught it too. The scent. The blood might have been old. The scar healed. But the energy lingering under her skin wasn't hers. It belonged to someone with beta dominance. Someone she once trusted. And it was the same exact signature as Lucien. She stared at Kael, chest rising fast. It can't be. But the wolf inside her knew. She felt it twist, recoil, rage. Because it wasn't just rejection that burned her now. It was betrayal. Real, ancient, buried deep betrayal. And she wasn't going to leave it buried this time. The scent on her attacker matched Lucien. If that twist made your heart stop, just wait. This story is only just tearing open on Sophia's Werewolf Chronicles. Betrayal always leaves a scent. The air grew heavier after the scar reopened. Like the forest around them had caught the scent of something it had long buried. Kael didn't say much that night. But his silence said enough. He watched her closely, not in fear, not in pity, but in a way that made her wonder what he was reading beneath her skin. The firelight flickered in his eyes, and the mark on her wrist warmed with every glance he didn't give her. Lucien's scent. On her. Not from the rejection. From the past. From a wound no one had spoken of until it bled through her sleep like it was tired of being forgotten. And Kael, he wasn't the type to let a truth like that sit still. By morning, he was gone. No note. No sound. Just a broken branch at the edge of the woods and the lingering pulse of his presence in the cabin. She didn't panic. She understood now Kael wasn't the kind of man to offer explanations. He was the kind to act. to move in silence, to tear into questions with his own hands and come back with blood under his nails. Still, she paced. The forest didn't feel the same without him in it. The space between the trees seemed wider. The wind too loud. She kept glancing toward the door as if she'd somehow missed the sound of his return. And beneath it all, her wolf stirred. Restless. Hungry. Confused, because something in Kael's absence had unsettled her deeper than she wanted to admit. He returned after dusk. Silent again. But not empty. There was something in his posture. A weight. A choice not yet voiced. He dropped something on the table. A folded parchment. Torn edges. Smudged ink. Seren didn't ask where he got it. She opened it slowly, fingers cold even near the fire. It was a page from an old Crescent Pack registry. Beta Initiates. Years ago. Her name wasn't on it. But Lucien's was. And scrawled beside his name, in rushed, near-illegible script, was a note. Assigned, Shadowruns. Area 3B. Incident report sealed. Her heart stopped. Area 3B was where she used to sneak away. Where she'd been attacked. Where the scar still burned. She looked up at Kael. He didn't blink. I don't have proof, he said. You do, she whispered. You just gave it to me. The truth hung between them like smoke. Lucien had hurt her. And no one had stopped him. Not the elders. Not the pack. Not even fate. She didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear. Out of something far more dangerous. Resolve. She stood outside just before sunrise, boots sinking into the soft mud beneath the melting frost, arms crossed, her breath thick in the morning air. Kael found her there. You should rest, he said. I can't, she replied. Not until I learn to shift. He said nothing, but she saw it in the way his jaw tensed. He knew what she was asking. And he hated it. Because shifting wasn't just about bones and pain and blood. It was about control. And she didn't have it. Not yet. The first time she tried, her vision went black. She dropped to the ground before she even made it past the first breath. Kael caught her. And he didn't say I told you so. He just waited until her eyes refocused and said, again. Her wolf clawed inside her. Not violently. Not cruelly. But desperate. For air. For freedom. For truth. Each time she tried, something inside her pushed harder. But not enough. It wasn't pain holding her back. It was memory. Day after day they trained. Kael didn't go easy on her. Not with words. Not with expectation. He didn't coddle her when she collapsed. Didn't flinch when she screamed. Didn't soften the way he spoke when her arms shook so badly she couldn't lift herself from the ground. He challenged her. And that challenge became the only thing keeping her upright. Because in his presence, under the weight of his gaze, she felt more alive than she had in years. Her body remembered things before her mind did. The way his hand grazed her shoulder when correcting her stance. The way his breath ghosted her neck when he whispered, "You're holding back." The way her mark flared when he stood too close. It should have terrified her. It didn't. It made her crave the shift even more. Not because she wanted power. Because she wanted control. But Kael was changing too. Not on the surface. Not in ways anyone else would notice. But Seren saw it. The way he started waking before she did, pacing before sunrise like his own thoughts wouldn't let him sleep. The way he spoke her name more softly. Not like a question. Not like a command. But like he was learning the shape of it. The way his hands lingered when he helped her to her feet. The way his eyes fell to her mark and stayed there. He didn't say what they both felt. He didn't have to. Because the bond didn't fade. And no matter how many times he pulled back, stepped away, went still in the face of temptation, it didn't break. It happened fast. Too fast. She was standing in the clearing, shirt clinging to her back with sweat, chest heaving from another failed attempt. Kael crouched a few feet away with a blade in hand, demonstrating how the shift energy followed breath and spine and center. And then, something cracked. Not outside her. Inside. Her wolf screamed. But not in pain. In release. Her back arched. Her limbs buckled. Kael's eyes shot to her, sharp, alert, but he didn't move. He knew. She dropped to her knees. And the fire ripped through her. Not literal flames, but the feeling of being undone. Every bone, every muscle, every breath, tearing, stretching, snapping. Her hands slammed into the dirt. Her breath became growls. And before she could think, she shifted. Uncontrolled, unmeasured, unforgiving. She didn't remember the next few seconds. Only flashes, teeth, wind, darkness. A tree snapping as she collided with it. The scent of blood. Not hers. Kael's. When her eyes opened, the world looked different. Sharper. Lower to the ground. Her paws trembled beneath her. She shifted back slowly, shaking, barely conscious. And there, slumped against a tree, blood running down the side of his ribs, was Kael. She tried to move. Her body failed. But her heart broke. Because she had wanted control. And instead, she had hurt the only person who hadn't turned away from her. And when she opened her eyes, Kael was on the ground, bleeding. Some wounds run deeper than the ones we leave behind. Stay with Sophia's Werewolf Chronicles, because the next shift might not be hers alone. There was too much blood. It soaked into the ground around him, too dark, too still. Kael wasn't moving. Not even to breathe. The torn skin across his ribs glistened wet in the fractured morning light, and his lips had gone pale, dusted with flecks of dirt from where he'd fallen. And she had done it. Seren knelt beside him, still trembling, half-shifted, her body caught between what she was and what she couldn't yet control. Her breath came in ragged bursts, sharp against the cold, and the sting of shame burned hotter than the fire she'd just survived. Her first shift. Her first loss of control. And Kael had taken the blow without lifting a hand to stop her. He could have. He should have. But he hadn't. Because he'd trusted her. Believed she could hold herself back. Believed her wolf wouldn't lash out. And now he was lying at her feet, blood pooling under his side like the forest itself had been asked to swallow his strength. She didn't speak. Couldn't. Words would have fractured under the weight of what she was feeling. Her hand hovered just above his chest. Not touching. Just trembling in the space between grief and something more primal. Then, the mark on her wrist flared. Not with pain, but heat. A pull. A surge. Like her wolf was reaching toward something, not to destroy this time, but to mend. To restore. To protect. And she didn't think. She didn't breathe. She just moved. Her palm pressed gently to the skin just above the wound. And the moment contact was made, something snapped inside her. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't even a sensation. It was a shift. Like her blood remembered something her mind had forgotten. Her mark burned gold and bright, so vivid it bled through her skin like sunlight. And Kael inhaled. One hard, sharp breath. His eyes shot open. And she nearly fell back. Not from fear. From the sheer intensity of the bond flaring to life between them. The healing didn't come from herbs. It didn't come from skill. It came from her. From her blood. Her bond. Her mark. And Kael's wolf recognized it instantly. His hand caught her wrist, not to stop her, but to anchor her. To tell her he was there, still breathing, still fighting, still his. The glow dimmed. The wound closed. And in its place, just beneath the fresh skin, was a faint shimmer. A residual trace of her power. Forbidden. Impossible. And yet undeniable. They didn't speak for hours. They didn't need to. By nightfall, the world had already shifted again. Kael stood at the edge of the clearing, fully healed, arms crossed, eyes locked on the horizon. Seren sat by the fire, her arms wrapped around her knees, the pressure of everything she didn't understand caving in from all sides. She shouldn't have been able to do what she did. Omegas didn't have that kind of power. And yet, she'd healed an alpha with a touch. It didn't make sense. It shouldn't. But the truth didn't care about shoulds. Kael finally turned. His expression was unreadable. Someone's going to feel that, he said. She blinked. What do you mean? Pack Council. Elders. Seers. Magic like that doesn't go unnoticed. Her chest tightened. She knew what he meant. The bond between mates was powerful. Sacred. But it was never meant to be used like that. Not to manipulate life. Not to override pain. Not to reverse death. That kind of power was ancient. And it had just woken up inside her. They didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, the summons arrived. Delivered not by a scout, but by a seer herself, an old woman wrapped in robes the color of bone, her eyes clouded with moon dust and silence. She said nothing, just handed Kael the seal, turned her back, and walked into the forest without looking back. The mark pressed into the wax was clear. A crescent within a crown. The council's mark. Seren didn't flinch. She didn't run. She went. Because hiding wouldn't change what was now carved into her skin. The pack council sat in a ring, high above the ground in the ancient hall of stone. Light filtered in through cracks in the domed roof, casting shadows that stretched like claws. Kael stood behind her. Not as her alpha. Not as her protector. But as something else entirely. Something unspoken. She stood alone in the center, her wrist bare, the faint gold glow still humming beneath the surface of her skin. The elders didn't hide their unease. "You healed an alpha," one of them said, voice echoing. "Explain how." "I didn't try to," Seren replied quietly. "Impossible," another spat. "Omegas don't carry mate magic strong enough for resurrection." "I didn't resurrect him," she said. "He wasn't dead." "A technicality." "She saved him," Kael growled from behind. "That should be the only thing that matters." But it wasn't. Because they weren't here to understand. They were here to decide what to do with her. An Omega who healed with her bond. A mark that didn't fade after rejection. Power that didn't obey the laws of hierarchy. The seer stepped forward, her staff tapping lightly as she walked. Her voice was the sound of old roots. "There is a prophecy," she said. "Long forgotten. Buried when the line of the Moon Queen was lost." The room shifted. No one moved, but the silence cracked with weight. The seer continued. "One girl. 2 brothers. 1 heart. 1 crown. The rightful heir not chosen by blood, but by bond." Seren's breath caught. Her eyes flicked to Kael. His jaw was tight, his fists clenched. He knew. He recognized it. Because the prophecy wasn't just old lore. It was their truth. Lucien had been chosen by the pack. But Kael had been chosen by something else. And now Seren stood between them. Not by choice. By fate. Or maybe, by defiance of it. The room stirred. "Her presence threatens our structure," one elder snapped. "She carries a magic that should have died with the old bloodline," another hissed. But the seer raised her hand. And they fell silent. "The moon will not be mocked," she said. "If the bond cannot be broken, then the path must be walked." "What path?" Seren asked, voice trembling. The seer met her eyes. "The one you were born for." They were dismissed with no clear verdict. Just a warning. Watch her. Test her. Don't let her stray too far. Kael led her back through the forest in silence, but it wasn't the kind that comforted. It was the kind that coiled. That whispered of choices left behind. Of truths yet to be named. And when they reached the cabin, Kael didn't go inside. He stood on the threshold, one hand braced on the doorframe, his gaze turned away. "You should know," he said quietly, "Lucien's not going to stay quiet." She turned to him. "You think he'll come?" "I know he will." "And what will he want?" Kael's eyes darkened. "You." It didn't take long for the forest to confirm it. The wind changed that night. The wolves howled differently. The scent arrived before the man did: ash, steel, and arrogance. "Lucien." Seren stepped out into the clearing before Kael could stop her. She needed to see him. Not for closure. For clarity. He emerged from the tree line as if he hadn't shattered her. As if he hadn't carved that scar into her side and left her in the snow to bleed alone. He smiled. And it didn't reach his eyes. "Hello, Seren," he said, voice smooth like wrought. She stood her ground. "I came to bring you home," he added. She said nothing. Kael moved behind her. Lucien's eyes flicked to his brother. "Interesting company you keep." "No more interesting than the brother who tries to claim what he rejected," Kael said flatly. Lucien's smile twisted. "I didn't realize I had to explain my choices to you." "You don't," Seren said. Her voice was calm, cold. "But you will explain them to the moon." Lucien's gaze dropped to her wrist. Still glowing. Still his. but the fire in it was no longer for him. And he knew it. "You were mine once," he said. "I was never yours," she replied. And the forest went quiet. Lucien arrived, not to apologize, but to claim what he rejected. Some bonds aren't broken. They're stolen, returned, and fought over in blood. Stay with Sophia's Werewolf Chronicles, because what happens next, no prophecy could predict. Lucien didn't come with a threat. He came with a smile. That was always the most dangerous thing about him, the way he wore cruelty like a tailored coat, neat at the edges, convincing to the eyes. His voice was soft when he offered it, his hands open, palms empty. But Seren knew. There was venom beneath every word. He stood there in the clearing, the same clearing Kael had nearly bled out in, and acted like he was owed something. Like her choice still belonged to him. "I came to make peace," he said. Kael didn't move from her side. Seren didn't answer. Lucien continued anyway, as if they were old friends and not scars carved into each other's spines. "You've made your point," he said, eyes drifting toward her wrist, still faintly glowing beneath her sleeve. "You've played in the wild long enough. I'm offering you a chance to come back. No punishment. No exile. Just return." Seren stared at him. The audacity of it. As if betrayal could be undone by invitation. As if the snow didn't still remember the shape of her knees hitting the ground. "What do you really want?" she asked. Lucien's smile deepened. To avoid bloodshed. It was then that she felt Kael shift beside her. Not visibly. Not loudly. But inwardly, like a tension pulling taut across his chest. Lucien noticed too. "That's the thing about banished wolves," he said, eyes locking with his brother's. "They're always one wrong breath away from being hunted again." Kael still didn't speak. So Lucien stepped closer. "I could tell them," he said softly. "Tell the council where Kael came from. What he really is. Why the elders made him vanish before the trials. They've all forgotten, but I haven't." The words hit like stone. Seren glanced at Kael, but his face was unreadable. "You do that," Lucien went on, "and the moment they smell seer blood on him, they'll come for both of you. You know how the packs handle prophecy. They bury it." Kael's silence wasn't stillness anymore. It was coiled rage. Lucien looked back at her. "So I'm offering you a way out. Come back. I'll make the council forget. You'll have my name, my power, my protection." Seren's heart thudded. Lucien stepped closer still, and this time, she didn't flinch. Because her wolf didn't recognize him anymore. Not as hers. Not as safe. Not even as fate. And then, he touched her. Fingers brushed her hand. A simple gesture. Nothing invasive. But her body recoiled. Not visibly. Not to humiliate him. But deep in her bones, her blood turned cold. The mark on her wrist, still tied to his rejection, remained dim. Unchanged. Unmoved. But when Kael stepped forward, just a breath, just a whisper closer, her pulse lit up. The heat rushed through her like the first time she shifted. Her skin remembered his hands. Her body leaned toward his presence like it was gravity. And Lucien saw it. Saw her reaction. Saw the truth he couldn't erase. "You feel it too," he said, voice like a blade now. She didn't deny it. Because denying it would have been a lie. Her soul didn't belong to Lucien. It never had. Whatever fate said. Whatever the mark promised. It was Kael her wolf responded to now. Kael who knew her without needing words. Kael whose presence quieted the ache instead of feeding it. Lucien's voice dropped to a whisper. "If you walk away from me, there's no coming back." Seren's gaze was steady. "I don't want to come back." Lucien's eyes darkened. His jaw tightened. But he didn't lunge. Didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "Then whatever happens next is on you." He vanished into the woods like a curse. And the moment he was gone, the clearing felt cleaner. Easier to breathe in. But it didn't soothe the storm rising in Seren's chest. She turned to Kael. "You're not going to ask," he said. She blinked. Ask what? What he meant. What they banished me for. Her breath caught. He was giving her the choice, to dig or to let it lie. But after everything they'd survived, after everything she'd begun to feel, she needed to know. Kael took a breath and stepped away from her, pacing slowly through the grass like he couldn't tell it sitting still. My mother was a seer, he said finally. Powerful enough that the elders tried to keep her hidden. They bred her to an alpha. Someone high in the crescent line. Seren's chest tightened. You're their son. He nodded once. Their secret son. Born under blood moon silence, buried in scrolls that don't exist. My mother died not long after I was born. My father swore I'd be raised quietly, trained but never named. Until I turned 13. His hands clenched. That's when the seers started seeing me. Seeing what, he never said. But Seren understood. Power. Potential. Threat. The elders decided I was too dangerous. I wasn't rejected, I was erased. Banished in the dark with the promise that if I ever returned, they'd brand me as cursed blood. Seren's heart pounded. They made you vanish, she said softly. And now your mark won't stop glowing every time I'm near you. She walked toward him, slow and careful, like she wasn't sure what she was doing until she was inches away. His jaw was tight, his eyes fierce. I shouldn't want this, he said. I shouldn't feel this. But you do. His hand lifted, fingers brushing her waist, tentative, trembling with restraint. And I do, she whispered. The silence between them cracked open. And then, he kissed her. It wasn't soft. It wasn't gentle. It was honest. All the fire, all the restraint, all the unanswered questions, all of it collapsed into that moment. Her lips against his. Her hands in his hair. His mouth claiming hers like he'd waited years for the right breath. Her mark burned so hot it lit the skin beneath her collarbone, tracing veins that had never glowed before. And then, the sky split. Not thunder. Not lightning. Something older. The clouds cracked in two, and a shaft of silver moonlight poured directly over them. Kael tore away, breathing hard, eyes wide. Seren gasped, the glow still surging through her body like a river on fire. Because that kiss hadn't just felt like a bond. It had changed something. The air. The magic. The rules. But the moment their lips touched, the sky split open. If you felt that storm in your bones, don't you dare stop here. The pull between them is only beginning to burn on Sophia's Werewolf Chronicles. The night after the kiss felt different. Not because of the sky. Not because of the way the moon carved silver light across the clearing like it was marking territory. Not even because of the way Kael looked at her afterward, stunned, shaken, raw. No, what changed wasn't outside her. It was inside. Something had cracked open when their lips met. A barrier between body and soul, between power and permission. And now that it was broken, she couldn't put it back. Her body pulsed with warmth that didn't burn, it glowed. Every breath she took felt laced with something deeper than oxygen. Something alive. Her wolf was quiet, but not asleep. She paced beneath her skin now, restless, alert, waiting. But that wasn't the part that kept her awake. It was the vision. It struck just before dawn. She'd barely drifted off when it hit her like a blow to the chest. She saw trees. Snow. The sharp curve of a clearing she didn't recognize until Kael collapsed into it, blood pouring from his mouth. His eyes were wide. Empty. And she was too late. Running. Screaming. But the light was already leaving his face. Her hand reached out for him. Her mark burned like it did the night she healed him before. But this time, it didn't work. He didn't breathe. Didn't move. Didn't come back. Seren sat up screaming, lungs tight, face damp. Kael was already there, crouched by her side, hands on her shoulders, voice low and steady, but his eyes were wild. Like he'd felt something shift even before she screamed. She pulled back, breath ragged. I saw it. Saw what? You, dying. His brow furrowed, mouth opening like he wanted to say it was just a dream, but he didn't. Because he knew better. The mark on her wrist was glowing again. And this time, so was his. A faint shimmer, just above his collarbone. A place no bond should have touched. But it had. Because the kiss hadn't just ignited something in her. It had branded something in him. The days blurred after that. She didn't tell him everything. Not yet. She wasn't ready for the weight of her fear to become his. So she trained harder. Longer. More furiously than ever before. If she could shift again fully, not by accident, maybe she could protect him. Maybe she could change the outcome of the vision. But her body wouldn't obey. Every time she came close, the pain split through her spine and knocked her flat. Her wolf snarled beneath her ribs, but wouldn't come forward. Like it was bracing for something. Like it knew something she didn't. Kael watched her silently through it all. And when she failed again, he finally asked, "What are you hiding?" She looked at him, breathless, arms shaking. "Nothing." He stepped closer. "Don't lie to me." The wind shifted. Her mark sparked. And the truth cracked her open. "I saw you die," she whispered. "In the clearing. I ran to you, but I was too late. My wolf wouldn't shift. I couldn't save you." Kael didn't flinch. But his jaw tightened. And in that small tension, she saw everything he didn't want to say. "I'm not afraid to die," he said. "I am," she snapped. Because that was the truth she hadn't wanted to admit. It wasn't just about the prophecy anymore. It wasn't just about magic or bloodlines or the bond. It was about him, and the way she couldn't imagine this world without his shadow near hers. That night, she couldn't sleep. Again. Her body wouldn't rest, so she walked the perimeter of the clearing, letting the cold air clear her thoughts. And that's when she saw it, something buried half beneath the roots of the old tree behind Kael's cabin. The moonlight glinted off the edge of something leather-bound. She dug carefully, fingers numb from frost. It was a journal. Old. Cracked at the spine. The edges warped from weather. But the script inside. She knew it instantly. Her mother's. Pages filled with visions, sketches, strange maps that weren't of land, but of stars and symbols she didn't understand. And then, halfway through, a name. Seren. Her name. Written in a curve of moon glyphs and seer tongue. And beside it, another. Kael. Not written as a warning. Not as a prediction. But as a bond. A binding. There were no sentences. Just a line that cut through her chest when she read it. "When silver blood finds gold, the crown will bleed." Her mother had known. Long before Kael touched her. Long before Lucien's rejection. Long before her mark first burned in the snow. She wasn't just a mate. She wasn't just a mistake of fate. She was meant for him. And the bloodline of kings and seers had carved that truth long before either of them knew how to bleed. She ran back to the cabin. Kael was still awake, sharpening a blade by the fire, but the moment she burst through the door, he stood. She dropped the journal on the table. His eyes scanned it quickly, recognizing the symbols, the names. And then he saw it. His name beside hers. His breath left his lungs like a gut punch. "She knew," Seren said. "My mother. She knew I wasn't meant for Lucien. She knew I'd be tied to you." Kael stared at the page. The fire crackled. And then he whispered, "So this was never fate's mistake." Seren shook her head. "No, this was fate's correction." And inside it was her name, bound to Kael's by blood. The journal didn't leave the table. Kael hadn't touched it since the moment he read the line that tied their names in ink older than prophecy. He stood motionless, back to the fire, hands clenched at his sides like he was holding back an avalanche. And Seren, she could feel it. The weight of knowing pressing against her ribs. Her mother hadn't written their bond as a warning. She'd written it as truth. But truth, in the hands of the pack, was never clean. And it didn't take long before the world came crashing for them. The challenge came before sunrise. Delivered not in words, but in blood. A sigil, painted on Kael's doorstep in wolf sash, curved in the shape of the Alpha's crest and crossed out with a red slash. Lucien had invoked the right. The forbidden trial. Not for territory. Not for pride. For title. Alpha blood to alpha blood. And one would not leave the circle alive. They didn't speak much that morning. There was nothing left to say. Kael prepared silently, wrapping his forearms in leather, tying his weapons at his back even though the trial forbade them. It wasn't about weapons. It was about dominance. Power. Fate. And blood. Seren stood by the fire, the journal clutched in her arms, the words echoing through her skull like a spell she couldn't unhear. "When silver blood finds gold, the crown will bleed." She didn't ask him not to fight. She knew better. But her wolf had gone still, and that terrified her more than anything else. Because silence was never nothing. Silence was waiting. The trial circle was held on sacred ground. An ancient basin cut into the heart of the mountain, lined with stone carved by wolves who had ruled before memory. The pack gathered around the edge in solemn quiet, robes fluttering, armor gleaming. This wasn't ceremony. This was sacrifice. Lucien stood in the center, bare-chested, arms outstretched like a king preparing for a coronation. The mark on his shoulder, the faded connection to Seren, was still visible, but dim. Cold. Empty. Kael stepped into the ring without hesitation. And the growl that built in Lucien's chest didn't come from anger. It came from fear. Because Kael didn't walk like a banished wolf anymore. He walked like something returned. The council stood at the northern edge of the basin. The seer stepped forward and raised her staff. No weapons. No interference. First blood is not enough. Only surrender, or death. Her voice fell quiet. Begin. They moved fast. Faster than even Seren expected. Lucien lunged first, teeth bared, shifting midair half-wolf, half-man, claws tearing forward. Kael dodged, spun, caught Lucien by the throat, slammed him to the stone. But Lucien twisted, broke free, and lashed out again, claws slicing across Kael's ribs. Blood hit the ground. But Kael didn't flinch. He smiled. Because pain was not new to him. Pain had built him. And now, with the mark still burning beneath his skin, he moved like a shadow loosed from the moon. Seren didn't realize she'd crossed into the circle until her boots hit blood. She hadn't meant to. But something inside her, something deeper than instinct, had risen too fast to hold back. Her wolf surged beneath her bones. Her breath caught. Her vision blurred. And then, Lucien landed a blow. Kael felt his knees. And Seren screamed. Not with sound. With power. Her eyes went white. Her spine cracked. Her bones shattered. But it didn't feel like pain this time. It felt like birth. And when the silver light exploded from her skin, the crowd stepped back as one. Her wolf emerged. Fully. Finally. Silver fur. Glowing eyes. Power rolling off her body in waves. But this was no ordinary wolf. She was taller than the others. Sleeker. Sharper. Ancient. Her growl shook the basin floor. Lucien froze mid-strike. Kael turned, still on one knee, and smiled. Not because she'd shifted. Because he recognized her. Seren lunged. Not to kill. To protect. She crashed into Lucien before he could raise his claws again, sent him flying into the stone wall with a crack that echoed through the mountains. The pack gasped. Because this was forbidden. No one, not even a mate, was allowed to interfere in a trial. But no one moved. Because they knew. They felt it. This wasn't interference. This was the prophecy taking shape. Lucien scrambled to his feet. Staring at her. Staring at it. His rejection mark burned dark on his shoulder. Her bond mark glowed like fire. And the wolf in front of him was no Omega. She stood beside Kael now, chest heaving, silver fur slick with sweat. Kael reached out, hand shaking, and rested his palm against her muzzle. And the moment he touched her, the seer collapsed. The ground shook. The sky split. And every mark in the basin, every bond, every rune, every line of heritage, lit up like a star system reborn. Because Seren Vale wasn't just a mate. She wasn't just a seer's daughter. She was something lost to legend. Moon-chosen. Power-bound. Royal-blooded. Her wolf was not born from the bloodlines of Crescent. It was born above them. And the moment she stood at Kael's side, the prophecy ignited. She wasn't just a mate. She was prophecy incarnate. She stood in the center of the sacred basin, her silver wolf form still glowing, moonlight coursing across her fur like liquid fire. The earth had gone silent. The trees didn't dare whisper. Even the elders, those proud voices who once ruled with iron and tradition, had fallen to reverent stillness. Seren Vale had shifted. And in doing so, she had not justified the structure of the pack, she had rewritten it. Her paws pressed into stone that had only ever known blood and war. Her chest rose and fell with ancient power, and when Kael stood beside her, every mark on her body pulsed with something that didn't belong to this world. It belonged to something older. Something above this place. Lucien hadn't surrendered. Not yet. But his silence said enough. He looked into her glowing silver eyes, and for the first time since she'd known him, there was fear. Not of her claws. Not of her shift. But of what she had become. The seer, still shaking where she had collapsed at the edge of the circle, whispered 2 words into the dirt. Moon-bound queen. Kael didn't take the title. He could have. After Lucien stumbled back from the trial basin, broken and exposed, the council tried to press it on him. The elders gathered, robes pulled tight, eyes wary but desperate, practically offering the Alpha crown as if that would fix the upheaval they had just witnessed. He didn't even look at it. He turned to Seren, still shifting back into her human form, bare, blood-streaked, glowing from the power she didn't yet know how to hold, and he said only one thing. We leave at dawn. Not because he didn't earn the title. Because he refused to inherit a kingdom built on lies. The exile was not chosen. It was inevitable. When a mate bond breaks tradition, the pack pretends it never happened. When a prophecy manifests, they bury it in new laws and tighter leashes. But when a royal-blooded, moon-chosen Omega rises with silver fur and seer lineage, every corner of the werewolf world reacts the same. Control her. Or kill her. Seren felt it the moment they crossed the river into rogue territory. The air changed. The trees no longer whispered in crescent dialects. No more patrols. No more curfews. Just wide, wild space, untamed and open, waiting to be claimed by something ancient enough to deserve it. She hadn't spoken much since the trial. Her voice felt like it belonged to someone else now. Someone who had once believed she was only what she'd been told, quiet, low-born, unmarked. That girl was gone. The one walking beside Kael now, cloaked in ash and blood, with a mark that wouldn't stop pulsing under her skin, was not just a mate. She was something that couldn't be named yet. And power like that always drew the wrong kind of attention. It didn't take long before the first hunter came. They found the body just past the river bend, charred, clawed, branded with a symbol Seren had never seen before, a skull with antlers, drawn in ash and burned into flesh. Kael had known it the moment he saw it. He crouched beside the corpse, jaw locked. Bone-packed, he said quietly. She frowned. What is that? Kael stood slowly, eyes on the trees. They're not a pack. They're a blood cult. Her breath caught. They take what the moon won't give them, he continued. Power. Longevity. Blood magic. They don't follow the council. They don't care about alpha rights or bond law. They believe the prophecy can be broken and rewritten. Seren didn't speak. She didn't need to, because her wolf was already growling inside her. And the heat rising beneath her skin told her what the Bone Pact wanted wasn't just her blood. It was her legacy. They moved deeper into exile. No trails. No roads. Only the shadows of half-forgotten places where the wild had swallowed the ruins of old kingdoms. Kael set up camp beneath the roots of an overturned tree, an ancient, twisted thing whose bark still bore scars from battles fought centuries ago. Seren rested her head against its trunk and listened to the forest breathe. But she couldn't sleep. The visions had returned. Worse now. Sharper. Not just of Kael bleeding, but of herself. Bound in iron. Mark seared black. Held down by hands she couldn't see, just bones. Bones in flame. And in the center of it all, a voice whispered over and over. Queen without a crown, or a name. She jolted awake. Kael was already at her side. You saw it again, he said. She nodded. His hand reached for hers. Not to comfort. To connect. And the moment their fingers touched, the bond lit up again, full, fire-hot, undeniable. Seren swallowed hard. We can't keep running. Kael's expression didn't change. We're not. She frowned. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. It was scorched at the edges. And on it, her name. Her full name. Scrawled in dark ink, circled in blood. Below it, one word. Bounty. Seren felt her throat close. Where did you get that? She asked. Kael looked up, voice low. They're burning them in every border town. Wolves are being promised gold for your capture. The Bone Pact isn't hiding anymore. Her pulse roared in her ears. Why no? Kael's jaw flexed. Because they saw what happened in the basin. They know the prophecy didn't just wake up, it chose you. The fire cracked between them, but no heat could match the blaze building inside her chest. She wasn't just hunted now. She was hunted by name. And every wolf that had once ignored her, belittled her, cast her aside, would now either kneel to her or try to break her. There would be no middle ground. Kael looked into the flames. You don't have to be what they say. Seren met his eyes. I already am. He shook his head. You're not a prophecy. You're a person. She leaned forward, voice steady. I'm both. Because she could feel it now, the truth curled into her bones. Her blood wasn't just royal. It was remembered. The mark didn't just link her to Kael. It had carved her into history. And if the Bone Pact wanted to rewrite it, they'd have to go through her. A scroll burns with her name, and a bounty on her soul. The sky was wrong the night they took her. Too still. Too quiet. Like the moon had turned its face away from what it knew was coming. Seren had felt the shift in the wind hours before it happened. Not with her ears. Not with her wolf. But with the marrow in her bones. A tightening. A subtle pulse in the mark on her wrist that didn't warn it grieved. They struck just before dawn. No hull. No growl. No scent trail. Just a thick fog rolling down from the hills, heavy with old magic and silence. She reached for Kael, only to find space where he had been. He'd gone to scout the perimeter, only for a moment. That was all it took. The first blade caught her in the side. Not deep enough to kill. Just to drop her. The second was laced with something cold. Paralytic. Seer forged. Her wolf surged. Clawed. Screamed. But her body fell anyway. And the last thing she saw before the dark swallowed her was a hooded figure tracing a circle into the earth with bone dust. She woke bound in chains that didn't smell like silver, but something older. Not forged for suppression. Forged for severance. Stone walls. A circular room. The scent of dried herbs and wet ash filled the air. Low chanting echoed from beyond the wooden door, voices pitched too high to be wolf, too low to be human. And standing before her, palms open, was a woman with eyes the color of milk. A rogue seer. The pack didn't follow the council. Didn't follow the moon. They followed visions. Twisted ones. They had taken her not to kill, but to erase. The bond is wrong, the seer said. Her voice carried no hate. Just certainty. Cold as prophecy. Seren didn't answer. The chains sapped her strength, but not her will. Her wolf still paced inside her, furious and awake. The seer stepped closer. We saw the flare. The sky burning above the trial basin. That kiss woke something the old bloodlines buried. Seren met her gaze. You're afraid. The woman's lips curled. We're preparing. Another seer stepped forward, hands covered in powder, eyes trained on Seren's mark. It glows too bright, she muttered. Too loud. It breaks the silence. We'll fix it, the first one said. They drew a circle around Seren, thick lines carved into stone, runes she didn't recognize. Symbols made for undoing. She knew what they were doing before they even touched her. They weren't going to kill her. They were going to sever the bond. Pain wasn't a strong enough word. It wasn't fire. It wasn't steel. It was emptiness. Like being ripped backward through every moment she had ever known Kael. Every look. Every breath. Every quiet understanding between heartbeats. They tried to carve it out of her like it was a tumor. Her mark flared. The runes fought back. Her wolf screamed. And then, he felt it. Kael dropped to his knees mid-sprint. The wind howled, but it wasn't the forest, it was inside him. A crack. A snap. Not in his body. In the bond. His chest tore open with something that wasn't pain, but a summons. Seren. She was hurting. She was breaking. And he didn't need to know where. Because the bond showed him. Through flashes. Images. Her blood. Her wrists. The runes burning into her skin. The circle trying to tear her soul away from his. And Kael shifted before he could even think. The air burst around him. His bones cracked. His body lengthened. His wolf erupted huge, black, vicious. And he ran. They didn't hear him coming. They didn't smell him. because Kael didn't approach. He arrived. 10 guards stood between him and the stone sanctuary. He didn't slow down. The first fell with a crushed spine. The second lost their throat before they could scream. The third tried to shift, but he was already airborne, claws slicing open their chest. He was silent. Efficient. Not out of rage. Out of purpose. Every step was a countdown. Every breath closer to her. Inside the ritual chamber, Seren's mark had gone white-hot. The chains had snapped from the inside, burned black from the heat her body couldn't hold. The runes cracked. The seer stepped back, but it was too late. Because the bond fought back. It didn't sever. It deepened. And through it, Kael burst through the door. His wolf barreled into the chamber, blood-soaked, eyes glowing. He didn't hesitate. He moved to her side. And Seren, still gasping, still glowing, touched his fur. And the bond roared. It wasn't just emotion anymore. It was power. Their connection flared so violently that the ritual circle shattered, lines torn up from the floor, candles snuffed out in an instant. The seers fell to their knees. One clutched her head. Too loud, too loud. Kael shifted back, sweat dripping, blood smeared across his chest. He knelt beside Seren, cupping her face. I felt everything, he whispered. Every scream. Every second. She leaned into his touch. I tried to stop them, she said. They wanted to erase you. His eyes burned. They'll never touch you again. But the seers didn't fight back. Not now. The oldest one stood slowly, hands trembling, face pale. She didn't plead. She didn't attack. She handed Seren something. A folded cloth. Crumpled. Smudged. Inside it, a child's drawing. Stick figures, but deliberate. A girl with silver hair. A crown dripping red. And beneath it, scribbled in shaky letters, Queen of Ash. Seren's fingers went cold. The seer said nothing more. And when Kael looked at her, he saw it in her eyes. This wasn't the end. It was a warning. But the seer was gone, and she left behind a child's drawing of Seren crowned in blood. The drawing didn't burn. She tried. Seren stood over the fire that night, fingers tight around the crumpled parchment, the child's crude lines shaking in her grip. The crown. The blood. Her name drawn in stick figure prophecy. It should have gone up in flames. Should have turned to ash and memory and smoke. But it didn't. Not even when the fire reached it. The paper curled, darkened, but the ink held. Refused to vanish. And she knew. This wasn't a warning from a child. It was a message from something older. Something that still remembered her before she knew how to remember herself. Kael watched her from the edge of the light, his arms crossed, tension rolling off him like thunder trapped in a man's frame. Neither of them spoke for a long time, because there was no comfort left in words. Not when the sky felt too close. Not when the stars had grown silent. But truth doesn't care if you're ready. It only waits so long. And when the knock came, 3 soft taps against the stone, too gentle for a stranger, Seren already knew. The door opened. And standing there, eyes wet with dust and time, was a face she hadn't seen since she was too young to understand grief. The midwife from Crescent. The one who had been there the night her mother died. Seren stood slowly. You shouldn't be here. I know, the woman whispered. But you need to hear the truth before the next moon. Before it's too late. They sat by the fire. Kael didn't interrupt. He simply stood behind Seren, his presence a constant anchor. And the midwife, hands trembling, unfolded the rest of her story like she'd carried it too long. She didn't die in childbirth, she said. Seren didn't breathe. The woman nodded, eyes flickering to the flames. She was murdered. They told us the baby you drained her power. That your wolf came early and broke her open. But it wasn't true. She was strong. I saw her shift hours before you were born. Seren's heart pounded. They said it was the blood, the woman continued, voice cracking. That your lineage was unstable. They didn't want anyone to know. Who? Seren asked. The woman hesitated. And then, Lucien. The word dropped like a boulder. Seren's skin went cold. He came to the birth, the midwife whispered. Not as a brother. Not as a beta. As an executioner. He wasn't supposed to be there. But he'd heard whispers that she was carrying seer blood. Royal blood. Seren's voice was barely audible. He killed her. He made it look like she died delivering you. But I saw the blade. He cut her throat before she could name you to the moon. Seren closed her eyes. The world tilted. And in her chest, her wolf didn't cry. She held. Not for grief. For justice. The midwife handed her something then. Wrapped in cloth. Drenched in memory. A pendant. Crescent-shaped. Inscribed in a language older than the pack. I couldn't protect her, the woman said. But this was hers. Passed down from the last queen of the moon bloodline. Seren stared at the charm. Her fingertips tingled the moment they touched the metal. A pulse. A yes. Not a memory. A recognition. Because this wasn't just a relic. It was a key. The sacred pool lay deep within the mountain. Few had ever seen it. Fewer still had survived it. It wasn't a place of prayer. It was a threshold, where seers came to awaken fully or burn in the truth that awaited them. Kael didn't want her to go, but she went anyway, because truth could no longer be postponed. The pendant led her, glowing faintly as she stepped over stone and moss and ancient roots, until the air grew so cold it bit her bones and the silence roared like wind. The pool was still, perfectly round, perfectly dark. Surrounded by stone walls etched in glyphs, her eyes only now began to understand. The moon hovered directly above it. And when she knelt, when she dipped her fingers into the surface, the water didn't ripple. It reached for her, wrapped around her skin like silk, welcoming her home. She stripped off her cloak, her clothes, every layer of who she'd been until only her mark and her name remained. Then she stepped in. The cold slammed into her like a second shift. But she didn't retreat. She went under. The visions came fast. Her mother. Smiling, arms outstretched, silver eyes shining. Her lineage. Wolves with crowns. For made of stars. Moons in their eyes. Power so old it could no longer be spoken. Kael, standing at the center of a battlefield, his chest bare, his eyes locked on hers, blood dripping from his hands. Lucien, kneeling before a dark figure, cloak made of bone, offering not gold, but names. And herself. Standing at the edge of a cliff, eyes silver white, arms raised toward a full moon that bled red. She opened her mouth. And the world shook. She broke the surface with a scream. The water exploded around her, lit from within by moonlight that hadn't touched the earth in centuries. She gasped. Her mark was no longer just glowing. It was alive. Veins of silver stretched up her arms, wrapping around her throat, climbing toward her temples. And in her chest, her wolf finally bowed. Not in submission. In recognition. Because Seren Vale was no longer just Seerborn. No longer just Moon-chosen. She was the last of the Moon bloodline. The daughter of prophecy. The queen without a crown. And now, the prophecy wasn't sleeping anymore. It had awakened. And now, the prophecy was awake. The moon turned red the night the packs gathered. Not from shadow. Not from eclipse. From reckoning. It rose slow and full above the sacred summit, bleeding light across the mountain ridge, casting long, sharp shadows that didn't sway with the trees. The stone beneath it had not known footsteps in generations. It had been kept for one purpose only. The trial of ascendancy. Where no alpha ruled. No council judged. No bloodline mattered more than will. It was not a tradition. It was a test. And if she failed, it would not be exile this time. It would be execution. Seren stood at the edge of the circle in silence. No cloak. No crown. Just the silver glow across her skin and the pulse of her mark flickering at her wrist like a second heartbeat. Kael stood beside her. Not behind. Not in front. Beside. He hadn't said much since she rose from the sacred pool. He didn't need to. They were connected now in ways that defied words. Their bond didn't just tie hearts, it carved fate. And it had drawn a line in the sand that could no longer be crossed without fire. The packs arrived in silence. One by one. The Crescent Pack. The Spine Wolves. The Hollow Court. Even the long-banished Northern Fong, cloaked in bone and old wounds. Each alpha took their place on the stone tiers, forming a circle of judgment around the trial grounds. No greetings. No gestures. Only waiting. For her. For what she was. The seers arrived last. Robes like mist. Eyes blind but seeing too much. They did not speak to her. They stood with the old council, shoulder to shoulder. And in the center, flanked by 2 guards and dressed in jet black. Lucien. The burn across his jaw from the trial with Kael still scarred and raw. But his eyes burned brighter than ever. He wasn't there to watch her fall. He was there to make sure of it. A low horn sounded. It wasn't blown, it breathed from the mountain itself, vibrating through the stone like the ancestors had stirred. Seren stepped forward. The moment her bare feet touched the circle, the runes carved into the stone flared white. Every mark recognized her. Every law resisted her. The circle did not lie. The seer raised her hand. "This is not a challenge of dominance," she said. "It is a trial of claim. Power does not decide this night. Blood does. Bond does. Truth does." Seren kept her eyes steady. "This is your moment," the seer whispered. "To accept your place. Or refuse it. But understand." She turned slowly to the circle of watching wolves. "If she fails, her blood will feed the roots." Lucien stepped forward. "I bring evidence." Seren didn't flinch. Lucien's grin was a wound. "Fate does not mark randomly. And yet, she claims 2 bonds, mine and my brother's." Murmurs echoed. "She would tell you the moon made a mistake. I say it made a choice. And to prove it," he gestured. From behind his guards, a girl was dragged forward. Young. Pale. Eyes wild with magic and fear. Seren's blood turned to ice. Because across the girl's neck was her mark. Faint. Imperfect. But clearly drawn. Fake. Crafted from her stolen blood. Lucien raised his arms. "Behold. The one fate truly marked. Not the queen of the seers. Not the exile. This one." Gasps. A few wolves growled low. The circle stirred. Kael stepped toward Lucien, voice like thunder. "You forge blood like you forge loyalty. With fear." Lucien didn't blink. "I do what's necessary." The seer turned to Seren. "Your answer." Seren didn't move. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Not because she doubted herself. Because she knew what she had to do, and she knew it meant no turning back. She turned to Kael. His eyes held the storm. Held the truth. He didn't move. Didn't breathe. But he knew. And so did she. She stepped forward. Into the center of the circle. Lifted her arm high. And let her mark burn. It ignited like wildfire, gold and bright and pure. Not just across her wrist, but up her arm, across her chest, down her spine. Her veins glowed. Her body shimmered. And she spoke. "I reject fate." Gasps. Shouts. Chaos. She didn't stop. "I reject the mate chosen for me by lies. I reject the path forged in fear. I reject the blood you claim belongs to me." She turned to Kael. And took his hand. "I claim what I chose. I claim who I bled for. Who bled for me. I claim the bond that defied rejection. I claim Kael." The circle pulsed. The moon flared red. And then, her mark burned gold. So bright it seared itself into the sky. And in that moment, her mark burned gold. The wind changed before the first sword was drawn. A deep, gut-heavy shift in the air. Like the mountain itself had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. The seers cried out. The runes cracked. And wolves began to choose. It started in silence, 2 crescent warriors lowering their weapons, stepping away from Lucien's guards. Then 4 more. Then 8. Until a third of the trial circle had moved behind Seren, forming a wall behind her and Kael. But not all. Some stayed. Loyal to blood. To fear. To tradition. And Lucien saw it happening. And smiled. Then let the war begin. It wasn't a duel. It was a break. Of history. Of structure. Of illusion. Wolves clashed in the circle as the stars blinked out behind smoke. Teeth tore. Magic cracked the stone. Blood spilled in every direction, soaking into the roots of the mountain. And in the center, Seren moved like prophecy itself. She didn't fight with brute strength. She fought with truth. Every step she took was followed by a glow in the earth. Every strike she delivered sent power arcing across the sky like lightning. Kael fought beside her. Not leading. Not shielding. Aligned. And when Lucien met her in the center of the storm, eyes blazing, teeth bared, the earth stilled. Because this wasn't about power anymore. This was the end of an era. Lucien lunged. Seren caught his wrist, twisted, drove her knee into his side. He staggered. "You were never meant to rule," she said. Lucien laughed through blood. "And you were never meant to survive." He lunged again. This time with a blade, obsidian-edged, laced with seer poison. It nicked her ribs. Her skin burned. Her vision blurred. But her will held. And when she caught him again, this time with no mercy, she drove the pendant her mother had worn into his chest, where the mark had once connected them. Lucien gasped. Power poured from the wound. Not blood. Light. Ancient. Final. He fell. Silence dropped like a hammer. Wolves froze mid-strike. Even the mountain went still. Seren knelt beside him, hand slick with blood, chest heaving. Lucien blinked slowly. His eyes, once fire, were dimming. But his voice still carried venom. "You think this ends with me?" he whispered. She stared at him. "You think the bone pact won't finish what I started? You think the moon will protect you?" He coughed, smiled, and whispered, "You'll regret saving him." But in his last breath, Lucien whispered, "You'll regret saving him." The battlefield still smoked when she rose. Blood had dried along her arms, dark against the golden veins that still shimmered beneath her skin. Her breath moved slow, measured, but every inhale felt like fire curling beneath her ribs. Lucien's body had not yet gone cold, and already the wolves began to shift. Not away from her. Toward her. Because the moment he fell, something ancient snapped free. A bond. A chain. A curse no one had ever dared speak aloud. And though the night was far from silent, every voice around her stilled when she took her first step forward. No crown weighed on her head. No steel marked her shoulders. But when Seren Vale crossed the center of the trial basin, there was no doubt left in any soul gathered what she was. Not a seer. Not an exile. Not just a mate. She was their queen. And the mountain knew it first. They didn't call her by her name that night. Not in the way they had before. Not as the Omega. The orphan. The anomaly. They called her what the prophecy had hidden beneath its warnings. Alpha Queen. She didn't speak when the title was given. She didn't need to. Her silence echoed louder than any oath. And when Kael came to her side, still bloodied, still breathing hard, she took his hand with the calm certainty of someone who no longer had anything left to prove. He didn't bow. He didn't kneel. He simply looked at her the way he always had, like she'd been made for fire and fury, and he was built to stand beside it. The weeks that followed were not gentle. Power never settles quietly. Even when war ends, the wolves do not forget what fear tastes like. And now, their queen did not just carry lineage, they carried legacy. Seren's first decree was not vengeance. It was unity. The scattered packs, those who once fought under Lucien's name and those who bled beside her, were brought to the table, not in chains, but with terms. There would be no more hidden seers. No more erased bloodlines. No more pretending fate was infallible. But not everyone believed in peace. Not all wolves knew how to follow without chains. Kael took his place beside her, not with the title of king, but as Alpha of the Vanguard, the protector of the throne. He bore new scars now. Some visible. Some not. The mark on his shoulder, the one that first shimmered when she touched him, had deepened. Thickened. Like the bond had decided to brand itself not just on skin, but into bone. He never left her side. Not when the delegates came. Not when the elders whispered behind closed doors. Not when the fires burned high into the night while the last survivors of the Bone Pact were hunted and dragged into the light. And not when she stood at the edge of the cliff above the Crescent Valley, arms bare, crownless, cloak snapping in the wind, claiming the place that once left her to die as her own. But power, no matter how righteous, draws shadows. And shadows don't beg to be seen. They wait. They listen. They plan. The message came on the 30th night. No sound. No scent. Just a breath of wind slipping through the tower door left ajar for only a second. When Kael found her, she was already standing over the scroll. Still sealed. Still untouched. But she had felt its weight the moment it crossed the threshold. Because it wasn't parchment. It was a warning. Wrapped in silence. Carried by death. He opened it for her. Inside, no words. Just a single symbol drawn in black ash. A cracked crown. And beneath it, a signature in old seer tongue. Seren read it slowly. Her hands didn't shake. But her heart did. Because that name had not been spoken since before her mother died. A name buried in the darker chapters of prophecy. The heirs of the bone. She folded the scroll carefully. Her eyes didn't move from the page. Kael's voice broke the silence. What does it mean? Her voice was low. Steady. It means we didn't kill the root. She met his gaze. We only cut the head. Outside the tower, the wind howled across the mountains. The night stretched long. And somewhere beyond the reach of the Queen's fire, something began to stir again. Not in numbers. In legacy. Because the bone pact wasn't made from wolves. It was built on blood. And blood doesn't forget. Heirs of the bones still breathe. The mountains were quieter now. Too quiet. Peace always came with that strange edge, as if the silence had teeth and the wind was just holding its breath. No war drums. No shouts. No prophecy unraveling across stone. Just stillness. And in that stillness, she walked alone. No guards. No crown. No Kael. Only her mark and the trees that once watched her shift for the first time. Seren walked barefoot into the forest that birthed her ruin and her rise. The same forest that had stolen her once and sent a black wolf to save her. The trees had grown taller. Or maybe she had just grown into herself. Her fingers brushed the edges of the old path, the one she'd taken as a girl when she'd been running from what she was. Now, she moved as something the trees bowed to. But she wasn't here to conquer. She was here to end something. Or maybe, begin. The clearing hadn't changed. Same patch of earth. Same crooked tree with the scar down its bark. Same stretch of sky above, wide and cloudless. She stood in the center. The place where she had first felt eyes in the dark. Where the mark had burned without fading. Where fate had broken. The air shifted. And without sound, without warning, she was no longer alone. The woman stepped from the shadows like she'd always been part of them. Long white robes. Eyes like galaxies. Hair woven with strands of light. No scent. No warmth. No shadow. The moon goddess didn't need an introduction. She was the night. Seren didn't bow. Didn't kneel. She simply stood. Because this wasn't worship. This was reckoning. The goddess's voice came not as sound, but as a feeling. Like wind moving through marrow. You changed the prophecy. Seren said nothing. You changed everything. A pause. Then, softer. Was it worth it? Seren finally answered. I didn't do it for fate. The woman tilted her head. I did it for him. For the bond fate tried to erase. And for every girl like me who was told she wasn't enough. The trees did not move. The goddess did not smile. But something in the world seemed to exhale. The woman reached out. Touched Seren's mark. It glowed once more, brilliant gold, then soft silver. And then, it dimmed. Not erased. Not broken. But quieted. A heartbeat that no longer screamed. Just lived. The goddess whispered, you are no longer bound. Seren's eyes burned. Because she had never asked to be bound. But she had fought for it. She didn't need the mark to know who she loved. Or who she'd die for. She turned to the wind. So what happens now? The woman stepped back. And disappeared into moonlight. Leaving only silence. The dream ended like a breath held too long. She woke in her chambers. No guards. No Kael. The scroll from the bone pact still resting in the fire grate, blackened but unburned. Her fingers brushed her wrist. The mark still lingered, but softer now. No longer a flare of destiny. Just a quiet echo. Not erased. Not forgotten. Just hers. Years passed like wind through the trees. Seasons turned. The packs held their peace. The mountains stood still. And the queen disappeared. No funeral. No trail. No note. Only a forest watched her pass and refused to speak. Some say she gave her power back to the earth. Some say she dissolved into moonlight. Some say Kael followed her, but returned alone. He never spoke of it. Never wore a crown. Never took another mate. But he built something different. A council of balance. A sanctuary for the broken-blooded. And at the center of it all, her name was spoken like flame. Children grew up hearing her story. Not just of the girl who was rejected, but the queen who chose herself. The one who shifted under the blood moon and made the sky split. The one who stood between fate and chose freedom. They whispered of silver eyes that still watched from the forest. Of a woman with no scent, no shadow. Only presence. They said, some say she still watches us. The queen with silver eyes. But if she'd known what was coming next, she might have run faster. Do you think fate ever gets it wrong? What would you do if the one who claimed your soul wasn't the one who marked it? Comment if you believe fate can be rewritten. And follow Sophia's Werewolf Chronicles if you believe the queen's story isn't done yet. If this story gripped your heart. If you felt every heartbeat, every scar, every howl in the dark. Then don't forget to subscribe to Sophia's Werewolf Chronicles for more tales of love, betrayal, and fated wolves. Your next obsession is just one haul away.